Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So again, like I said, we're gonna see the last chapter of this course, the postmodern art, today and next week. So, the modern art we learned last week was about the World War I period, right? And the postmodern art is around the World War II. And there are huge differences. The modern art arose in Europe, right? But the postmodern art flourished in the United States. So let's see the background first. All right, so the World War II was brought to a terrifying end on August 9, 1945, when the United States, excuse me, dropped an atomic bomb on the Japanese city of Nagasaki. So the United States and the Soviet Union had emerged from the war as the two dominant superpowers were entering into the prolonged nuclear-armed standoff known as the Cold War. So we are going to see the art movements about that era. And the center of artistic energy had shifted. So several developments had paved the ways for this flowering of advanced art in America. One was the founding of the Museum of Modern Art in New York City in 1929. So do you remember the starting day of the modern art was foundation of Louvre Museum in Paris, in Europe, right? And this time, the postmodern art started from the foundation of the Museum of Modern Art in New York City. So the painters associated with the first major post-war art movement are commonly referred to as the New York School. New York School. One second, let me just use the highlighter. So the New York School, during the World War II, and there are diverse art styles emerged in 60s and 70s in America. So now we are going to see this abstract expressionist of the New York School and the pop art in 60s and 70s today. So let's see the New York School first. The New York School was a convenient label under which to lump together a group of painters, also known as the abstract expressionists. So abstract expressionists were Jackson Pollock and Willem de Kooning. Let's see these two artists together. This is Paul Jackson Pollock. We saw his work before. When you learned the unity and variety, the principles of design. So Paul Jackson Pollock was an American painter and a major figure in the abstract expressionist movement, and he was widely noticed for his technique of pouring or splashing liquid household paint onto a horizontal surface, enabling him to view and paint his canvases from all angles. So Jackson Pollock had perfected his drip technique called like action painting. So Pollock placed the unstretched canvas on the floor and painted on it indirectly by casting paint from a brush in controlled gestures or by dripping paint from a stir stick. So layer after layer, color after color, the painting grew into an overall tangle of graceful arches, dribbled lines, splatters, and pools of color. Now let's see the next expressionist, abstract expressionist artist, Willem de Kooning. Willem de Kooning was a Dutch-American abstract expressionist artist, and the years after World War II, de Kooning painted in a style that came to be referred to as abstract expressionism or action painting, and was part of a group of artists that came to be known as the New York School. So this is his painting. De Kooning's well-known woman series, this one, began in 1950 and culminating in Woman 6 owes much to Picasso, not least in the aggressive, penetrative breaking apart of the figure and the spaces around it. The woman painting is considered as a significant work of art for the museum through its historical context about the post-World War II history and American feminist movement. He once believed the history of female representations as the idol, the Venus, and the nude. Now we're going to move on to the 60s and 70s art. This is composer John Cage, and he said, music and art should be an affirmation of life, not an attempt to bring order out of chaos, nor to suggest improvements in creation, but simply a way of waking up to the very life we are living. So the most of the 60s and 70s art movement arose based on the mind, like the John Cage said. So like the Dadaists of 40 years earlier, young artists began mixing art back up with life as they found it, sometimes literally and often humorously. Critics called the trend Neo-Dada, means new Dada. During the 60s and 70s, the directions that had been set out in the previous decade were continued, questioned, and complicated by new trends. So the first art movement in 60s and 70s we are going to see is pop art. So pop means popular. The artists of pop found a gold mine of visual material in the mundane, mass-produced objects and images of America's popular culture, such as comic books, advertising, billboards, and packaging, and the ever-expanding world of home appliances and other commodities, and photographic images from cinema, television, and newspapers. So like New Dada, pop drew art closer to life, but life as it had already been transformed into images by advertising and media. So we are going to see 3 pop artists today. The first artist is Andy Warhol. Andy Warhol was born in Pittsburgh to working class immigrant parents, and Warhol earned a degree in design at Carnegie Institute of Technology in 1949. He was an American artist, director, and producer who was a leading figure in the visual art movement known as pop art. His goal was to become a commercial artist, and within a year of arriving in New York City, he had top assignments from Glamour magazine, Harper's Bazaar, Vogue, Martini and Rosie, Columbia Records, and many others. And his whimsical line drawings of cats, butterflies, and especially women's shoes like this made him one of the most sought and highly paid illustrators in the city. After working as an illustrator for only a few years, Warhol reinvented himself as a fine artist. He based his paintings on imaginary he found in the American mass media, such as news photos, celebrity, headshots, film stills, comics, logos, and advertisements. To convert his source images into paintings, Warhol made them into photo silkscreen like this. We'll learn this technique, right? And painted them on canvas. So smudges, misalignments, and inconstancies were accepted, giving the paintings an handmade appearance despite his use of a commercial process. So now I'm going to share a video how to produce the silk screen work of art on the canvas. Yeah, that's the way how he created silk screen work on the canvas. So it looks like this. You're so familiar with this kind of style, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So sometimes the paintings include a single image, as in Marilyn Monroe, and the Campbell's Soup series like this. So these become larger than life iconic portraits, while those printed in Greece suggest the way that repetition can simultaneously embed an image on one's memory and that its effect. These brash, innovative works are considered icons of pop art, a movement that both celebrated post-war American consumer culture. By the end of the decade, Warhol had become a celebrity in his own right, equally famous for his platinum wig and the star-studded parties he threw at his studio, The Factory. He called his studio as Factory, and as he was for his paintings, drawings, sculpture, and films. In 1968, Warhol was shot and nearly killed by the actress Valery Solaris, who had a bit part in one of his films. Post-shooting, his work became both more commercial and more introspective. He hired himself out as a portraitist, making flattering images of the rich and famous. But he also made a haunting self-portrait that hinted at his purported fear of death. So although he was only 58 years old when he died, he left an immense body of work that seems increasingly relevant today as the distinctions among art, entertainment, information, and spectacle continue to erode. Now, let's see the next pop artist, Roy Lichtenstein. Roy Lichtenstein was born on October 27th, 1923 in New York City. And his father was a successful real estate broker, and his mother was a homemaker, and she had trained the Roy Lichtenstein as a pianist, and she exposed Roy and his sister Renee to museums, concerts, and other aspects of New York culture. So Roy showed artistic and musical ability early on. He drew, painted, and sculpted as a teenager, and spent many hours in the American Museum of Natural History and the Museum of Modern Art. So this is his work. So it looks like a cartoon, right? So his work is inspired by cartoon, which is one of the America's popular culture. Roy Lichtenstein used stencils, thick block outlines, and primary colors to elevate both the commercial images and the commercial painting process into art. He used familiar imagery to create art that could be enjoyed by the masses after the series and complicated abstract expressionist movement. He said like this: pop art looks out into the world. It doesn't look like a painting of something. It looks like the thing itself. So let me share a video to see his amazing work of art. When we see his work in this screen, it doesn't look like it just looked like the cartoon. But when you see his work process, you're gonna be overwhelmed. It's a large canvas work, and we can see how the artist create and get the idea to create that amazing work of art.
Diagram is maybe a good word for the way I represent other artists. That may be true of cartooning, that it tends to be a diagram of a person. It seems to depict by outlining and delineating in a simple way what a subject is.
The studio was his favorite place. It was the idea that he could actually come down and play. Sometimes he just liked to come down and even clean his paintbrushes and look around at the work he was doing, at that time. kept a pretty regular schedule. I mean, he was usually in the studio by 10, had the same thing for breakfast every single morning, broke for lunch, came back and worked.
It wasn't like I have to go to work today, God, I have to paint today. Nothing. It was his joy, it was his pleasure, it was everything. Sometimes I'd go to the studio in Southampton and he'd be alone in the studio. I'd sit in the little chair and watch him work. And I thought I'd be distracting him. No, I'd watch him work and he was just focused. Nothing to distract him.
He had never really dreamed that he would be able to support himself through just painting. That was something that made him truly happy.
So the question of the hour is, how are you going to work in Rome?
I'm going to do some drawing and thinking and mostly eating, I think.
He was exactly, the first day I met him to the day I never saw him again, the same way. Easygoing, charming. He wasn't judgmental.
I was working at the Bianchini Gallery in New York, and we did an exhibition called The Great American Supermarket, and thought, wouldn't it be great if instead of a regular poster, we could get Roy Lichtenstein and Andy Warhol to put an image on a shopping bag. They both agreed. And I met Roy in 1964 when he came in to sign the shopping bags.
Well, it was 64, so he was pretty well known. He was an internationally known artist. There was still great controversy. It was in the air. Is pop art serious? Is it this? Is it art? All that stuff was still up there. A lot of people were upset about it. You know, the abstract expressionists must have felt pretty upset because they saw their whole anguished world vanish in this kind of ironic and witty and beautifully done work.
What I did in these early paintings was frightening to me, really, and it seemed to go counter to a sense of taste I had developed along with, I would hope, a sense of art. Except I knew it had meaning, and I knew it very shortly that it had more meaning than the things I had done before. But because it was so different, it was really frightening.
He was not a fan of comics. It was the nature of the cartoon. It just seemed as far away from an artistic image as you can get, and to try to transform that into a formal painting really appealed to him. He also found it impossible to go back to doing what he had been doing. I must say, he never quite managed to get the tormented look in those paintings. He wasn't the tortured artist. He used to joke and say he was going to take curmudgeon lessons. When Roy was at Ohio State, he had an art professor, Hoyt Sherman, who was a huge influence on him. Talked all about ways of seeing and perception. He had methods of teaching where he flashed slides in a dark room really quickly and had people sketch them so that they could get the kind of wholeness or gestalt of the work. That really had a major impact on Roy.
When I turn the work upside down, it's to obliterate the subject or to resense it. You can think of it more as pure mark than you can subject. You can see it clearly if you look at it through a mirror because it reverses everything, and anything you don't want is sort of doubly off because it's the other way around. It's almost the same as coming back 2 weeks later or something and looking at it, and you see what's off then. art's about something that's entirely different from what my original sources were. And I like the contradiction. I think people mistake the character of line for the character of art. But it's really the position of the line that's important, or the position of anything, any contrast, not the character of it.
Anything that was kind of high-flung always amused him, and he himself had just kind of natural humility, really.
I paint the pictures and he sells them. How's that? What could be better? It's pretty simple. Leo.
Well, I'll try to be a little bit more complicated, but not too much.
Yeah.
And I would say that there are several kinds of ships that can exist between a dealer and a painter. The best one is the one that's one of friendship, and that's what my relationship is to Liechtenstein.
Well, that's true.
Leo Castelli was his dealer for his entire life from 1961 until his death. They trusted each other completely. They never had a contract. As Roy started to become kind of more successful and better known, he used to joke and say, someone's going to be tapping him, Mr. Lichtenstein, it's time for your pills. And he'd be in a wheelchair and with his hat cocked on his head. And he would still be living in Oswego, New York, snowed in. And this would all have been a dream.
How was the artist?
I enjoyed that.
Yeah, you enjoy that? So, one of my favorite art movement is pop art because it's easy to understand and it feels like the art is not too far from the public. So, yeah, he's awesome. That's right. All right, now let's see the last pop artist, Jeffrey Koons. Jeff Koons is an American artist. You know what? He's still alive. And he is recognized for his work dealing with popular culture and his sculptures depicting everyday objects, including balloon dogs, balloon animals, produced in stainless steel with mirror finished surfaces. He lives and works in both New York City and his hometown of York, Pennsylvania. So this is the balloon dog, one of his symbolic work. Looks cute, right?
Remember that.
It's a giant sculpture. It was about 6 years ago. The Whitney Museum, they have the Jeffrey Koons special exhibitions, and then there are 4 floors, 5 floors of the museum, and then they use the whole 4 floors to show his work. Because he has so diverse works and his work sizes are so huge. So yeah, it was really worth to see his diverse works. It was so great. Anyway, so Jeff Koons, one of the world's most expensive living artists, widely known for his balloon animal sculptures. This one began his bronze Hulk Elvis series more than a decade ago. And this is the Hulk Elvis. Works from the ongoing series Hulk Elvis range from precision machined bronze sculptures and is inspired by an inflatable of the popular comic book hero and extruded in 3 dimensions. For Kunz, the character represents not only Western comic book culture, but Eastern guardian god as well. And he said like this, they're there as protectors. But at the same time, they can become very, very violent. And the Hawks are like that. They're really high testosterone symbols. Kunz designed Lady Gaga's art pop album cover and exhibited the artwork at Gaga's art rave in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. So I'm going to share a video about his interview, and he's talk about how he create his work of art. It's really great video to understand this amazing artist.
I really did not know fine art as a child. I was learning aesthetics through my father. My father was an interior decorator, but I wasn't visiting art museums. And you have to learn how to trust in yourself. And when you trust in yourself and you follow your interests, that's really where you find art. If I think about striving for perfection in my work, I think right away of my father. Within our family, we always joke about when my dad would put up our Christmas tree, and we would always have hundreds of balls that would go on the tree, and he would each year dust all of them to be sure that they were really perfect, no fingerprints on them. And when I would work with an object, I would want every detail, every perfection or imperfection of the object. So when somebody would view it, that they could maintain this kind of suspension of disbelief and go along with this abstraction for as long as possible. So there's an aspect of control of vision to be able to achieve something that I picked up from my father. When I moved to New York, I really wanted to move into the objective. I did not want to paint what I dreamt the night before. I wanted to be involved with a more universal vocabulary. So I just started to work with ready-made objects. So there was a very kind of strong, kind of pop, Duchampian type of aspect to my work. And what I really found is that everything's a full circle. And it's like the yin and the yang. And the idea of the subjective to the objective, it's not a line, it's not a linear line that you have the subjective here and the objective here, but it's circular. I remember my art history teacher, the first time ever seeing Manet's Olympia. He put it up on the screen. He started to speak about this work and about the different symbols and different meanings, and I started to realize that this activity of art connects you to all the human disciplines. And I can be having a dialogue about sociology and philosophy and physics, I mean all realm of the human disciplines. I just felt potential that I had an activity to be involved with that could connect me with other people. When I think, what an artist does, it's about making gesture. And a lot of people right away think about throwing paint or, making a physical gesture. But, you can make a philosophical gesture. And a lot of times people feel very inferior to art. They feel intimidated by it. But the art really happens inside you.
So that was the last artist. How was that? He's very interesting artist, right?
Yeah, he's it's interesting that he's still living and still working. I want to see what else he has.
Yeah. All right, so that's it for today. We have a discussion topic today. Someone already posted. So we just learned pop art. So this is today's topic. Pop art arose in 60s and 70s, and it is still popular work styles of art. Pop artists such as Andy Warhol, Roy Lichtenstein, Jeff Koons use America's popular culture for their work of art. So discuss America's or your home country's popular culture and tell us your favorite pop culture with the brief reason. And also you can attach images to show your favorite popular cultures example. Any questions?